Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the economy at this time as far as, of course, the government's proactive efforts are concerned to stimulate economy, also to, of course, further the goals as far as our economic progress is concerned. With regard to, of course, particularly the Saudi Arabian delegation's visit, we'll be talking about that. What can we expect as far as the IMF program is concerned? Of course, its conditionalities and the path forward for Pakistan in the next couple of years. All of that today. A little later on, we'll also be talking about the Iranian and Israel situation, its ramifications on the region overall, and also, of course, as far as our strategic position is concerned, as far as our geopolitical situation is concerned, what kind of ramifications this conflict can have overall for us, for the world. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Dr. Khaqan Najeeb, who is an economic expert. Thank you so much for joining us today. Dr. Khaqan, we've spoken from time to time on economy and, of course, the issue of economy largely with regard to, of course, our prevalent situation and the fact that we are seeing proactive efforts by the government to try to stimulate growth, to try to stimulate investment as far as economy is concerned. We've also seen the recent visit of the Saudi delegation. How are you looking at things today versus, of course, perhaps even a year ago, 2 years from now, a couple of months from now?
So, Mahrukh, whenever we've spoken, I've always been of the opinion that the best way to handle the ongoing challenges in the economy are to remain engaged with the IMF. So, Mahrukh, let me just share something with you. So, we engaged with the IMF in July. Our reserves were under $4 billion. Our current account deficit was running high, and our inflation had at one stage touched 38%. Now we've almost had 8 to 9 months of engagement with the IMF. Pakistan's reserves, after making a hefty payment of $1 billion on 12th of April for a bond that was due from Pakistan side, maturing, I think it's a 10-year bond that we paid. Pakistan's reserves have risen to $8 billion. Rupee is much more stable and also has strengthened from a interbank low of 307 to nearly 280 to 78 and is not gyrating and is not volatile. Pakistan's current account, Mahrukh, in the first 8 months of this fiscal year 24 stands at about $1 billion. Pakistan's current account, same time last year, the deficit was $4 billion. So inflation has tapered, current account has stabilized, macro volatility has reduced. This
Dr.
is
Hakan,
the
I'm
effect.
going to interject. I'm just going to interject, and I think I want to make it easier to understand for people who are not economic experts. As when you say inflation has come down, do you think that the overall effect of this, coming down as far as inflation is concerned, is being felt by the people, or it's perhaps the effect is going to be further down the road?
So you've asked a very, very pertinent question. When I say inflation has come down, that does not mean that Pakistan's prices have gone down. What it means is that prices were rising at a level of, let's say, 38% year on year. Now that has tapered down to near 20%, but our core inflation outside the food and energy has further reduced in terms of the increase in the price that takes place year on year in a month that we see to about 14-16%. So people have felt less of a pain than they would have had inflationary trends remained much more heightened than they are now. So in coming months, I think this will taper more as we move into more macro stability. So that's where we stand largely. That does not mean that we have been able to solve the perennial issues of energy, taxation, exports, but in the short term, there is certain stability. The default fears have subsided completely. So now Pakistan has started to engage as we did with Saudi Arabia. This macro stability gives us some room to engage with Saudi Arabia which we've been doing for a number of years to try and move beyond. They are helping us, one, in terms of deposits in our central bank. We started with about $3 billion. Last July, they increased that to $5 billion. We also get fuel from them on deferred payments, which means that if the fuel comes this year, in this month, it is payable next year this month. So we get a bit of breathing space. Now we've tried to engage with them, and this has also been a struggle that, set up a refinery, buy some of our assets, buy some of our brownfield, the projects which are already there, take interest in, whether our generation companies. So we've been trying to do that. It's unfortunate for me to say that His Royal Highness's last visit, and since I was with the government, I distinctly remember from 2019 to now 2024, and the talk of setting up a refinery in Pakistan is still something that I'm saying is on the table with a bit of change. What now we are saying is that we set up a refinery which sets up petrochemicals which we can sell to the whole of the world. They are also interested in the Reko. Of course, Pakistan's copper reserves are now a key in the world. I've always said that two things can change in the more recent future Pakistan's trajectory. And I wrote an article, Mahrukh, it's called Rocks and Crops. And this was in the Dawn newspaper on 15th of December 2022 before we embarked on this mission. Rocks is your mines and minerals. So they have shown interest in Reko. 50% of the Reko ownership is still with Pakistan. The rest is with Barrick Gold, which is, an international powerhouse when it comes to mining. So if you add, the Saudi Arabian kind of stamp to it, that would give more credibility. Third, I hope there is interest in the agriculture farming for food security of Saudi Arabia. So that is the other interest there. So in Saudi Arabia's vision of very quick development, fast development, and also of using, high tech, probably some of our IT services can also be used. I also hope that the defense minister came. I don't know the details on that one in particular. There is some movement on the defense production that we now do. We've sold JF Thunder to countries in Africa. So I hope there is some movement there as well. And then, of course, there are, 2.8 million Pakistanis who send us a huge amount of remittances who work in Saudi Arabia. So I think that's the kind of menu that has been given to them. I'm told that projects worth 25 to $30 billion have been pitched to them. But having said all this, Mahrukh, we are still at a stage where you've pitched a project. Now, there is going to be, I hope, a follow up within the end of this month where we can pitch deeper. Let's say they show interest in a project. So let's dig deeper into the feasibility. If it's a new project, then there are cash flows and how that will the economic viability. Or if it's a working project, let's say Daimir Bhasha Dam, and they want to put in money in that, I'm sure we have more work there. I think SIFC has done a decently good job in trying to this time at least put together this kind of package where we have shown to them, in a language which is business-like, in a mode that is business-like, in a framework that is business-like. Now let them come back to us, show interest, and then we do much more hard work. But we also have to remember that Saudis now do have money, but then the world is their, canvas. So we remain in a geostrategic linkage with them that gives us some leverage. But the real leverage up to the $5 billion is what the communique said. So it's a joint communique. So I trust that the Saudi stamp is there too. If a billion or so is in Reko, let's hope that the rest comes in other areas as well. I think this is a good narrative, Mahrukh, because all the time when you and I discuss, you ask me about the IMF, the multilateral loans. I think that's a given. My point of view has been very clear. We stick with the IMF, but then there is an IMF plus that you have to do. Setting Pakistan's
Dr.
investment
Khaqan,
climate.
when we say that, when you talk about all of this translating into tangible investment, Do you see a timeline, as far as these projects are concerned, as far as a response is concerned, as far as, because like you said, the interest is there, but for it to actually translate, what kind of a timeline do you look at it? I mean, even cautiously, even optimistically.
So, Mahrukh, today you're asking all the right and the difficult questions. So here's my sense on this. I think in the next couple of weeks, we should kind of find, uh, an implementation framework with some timelines. I don't think Pakistan has reached that stage with Saudi Arabia. I would have hoped that we do, or we had reached that stage, let's say. But even with so much work, the stage is still where you've pitched, let's say 25, $30 billion of various sectoral works. They have to show interest, and then we can see the feasibility. I think here I would tend to think, on this, that the process is not as advanced as one would have liked it to be. So let's hope that this implementation framework with some timelines and some particular interest in a particular project comes through. I don't think that's come through. Recodec is the only one, and the feasibility of the petrochemical based refinery is the other one, which seems to be more on the tangible side. But the timeline, 6 months, year. But in the next 2 to 3 years, something should mature, which is which creates the kind of inflows. In the brownfield, one should see in the next couple of months. Now, this is very, very important because we've gone a long way on this in publishing, in advertising, in marketing this. Pakistan now needs to close this one deal so that I can showcase to the world that Pakistan is now not only a destination for the IMF work that we do, but also even a $300 million project, whether in any area, would put Pakistan on a map. You want an internationally acclaimed channel to run that news, or PTV World to run that news, that this is now a closed deal. As we say, in the end, in the private sector, we ask our colleagues, did you close or you're still in negotiation? So, yes, you're right. Somewhere, someday in the coming months, we need to close. But an implementation framework also needs to be put out, which is sanguine and, doesn't talk of, too many billions of dollars, but is a framework which the market believes, as it now believes that up to $5 billion is something doable with the Saudi Arabian regime. But add another 5 billion of deposits, so an overall package of $10 billion, and that's fine to go by. Add another billion, 2 billion of the oil facility, so that's all right if we can
Dr.
put
Haqqan, now
this
when you talk about
framework.
putting this on the, like you said, when you talk about, closing, do you think changes that are happening in the Middle East at this time, for example, there is a certain amount of turmoil, we were looking at things, geostrategic changes. Do you think that those can have an impact on the fuel prices, and as a result, we are vulnerable, or no?
When I woke up this morning, Mahrukh, and it was early in the morning, and I start looking at the international global markets. So Japan opens, then Australia opens, and then we wake up in Asia, and then Europe, and then America. That's how the world plays out. So when Asia was not was almost opening, and Australia was open, suddenly the markets took a downturn, and the oil spiked from 87, $88 Brent, all the way to 91. And everyone was trying to figure out. And then came the news of the Israel retaliation on the Iranian soil. But then, within a few hours, we were to find out that no major damage had been done. No installation that was strategic had been hit, and life went on. The best case scenario here, with the markets are pricing in, is oil's back down to $88, $87, that's where it's hovering, is that these are skirmishes, and the response from both sides is now almost done. That's the best case scenario. Of course, no one can really tell, but it seems, retaliation, counter retaliation, and it's more confined. And let's hope that it is this way. If it is this way, then things would probably hover around the levels it is hovering around. Otherwise, you could see a $10 to $15 spike on the oil market. But having said that, whenever things like that happen, of course, any investments that the world is seeing slow down. But let's hope that this kind of plays out or has played out, and trying to remain more positive that this is the end of this. And the US statement also was helpful, where they support Israel. They also said that they would like to see this concluded. They would like to see de-escalation. I think that's the whole world's view, that now de-escalation measures should be put in place, and that's how the world should move. Let's hope that that happens and the markets behave more orderly, and the Brent and the oil prices don't go up, because that hurts us. Every 5 to $10 dollar rise hurts us, our import bill, and also the price hikes that we have to do.
When we talk about the dollar, for example, you said, and I agree, I mean, of course, largely we've seen a stabilization as far as the dollar is concerned. It's not volatile. But in terms of it coming further down, we haven't, I mean, it's right that, it's sticking at a certain point, but for it to go further down, or for the rupee to perhaps further strengthen, we're waiting. And, like you said, is it going to be about the investment that comes in? That we're going to have to wait for? What are the indicators there?
So I think, as a serious economist, what I worry about is getting my macroeconomic situation under control, getting inflation under control, ensuring that there are adequate flows so that there is no pressure on the reserves that my central bank holds, ensuring that the trade gap narrows down, my exports pick up, ensuring that the productivity of the economy improves, ensuring that the remittances come through the formal channels, ensuring that the IT and the ITS exports, we get $3.5 billion this year. I think the number is higher, but it's, stuck through other means, is formalized. So let's say if I was to ensure all this, so I'm ensuring the supply of the dollars that come in. They ensure that my reserves stay stable even after paying for the current account deficit and the monies for the debt that are required. And I think the rupee will take care of itself. But keeping a competitive exchange rate is important, so that our exports remain competitive in the world, and Pakistan is price competitive, and we can, sell our exports. But as our exports become higher, and as our productivity and as our economy strengthens, the rupee would find its right place. That's always the right answer. If we are growing in incomes, people would worry less about where the rupee settles down, but should worry more about the fact that our 9% export to GDP goes to somewhere 15 in the coming years. So that's how I tend to think about it. But generally, I think rupee is stable. When I see enough supply is available, I think state banks mopped up a few $100 million from the interbank. Still, the rupee is stable. Let's hope that the next IMF engagement, which is not going to be easy, and we can, have a chat about it in another program, happens. All these things, and our heightened payments are a risk, and the risk is not minor. There is substantive risk, in terms of, all that we have to put together, and that's how the economy is. But
But
this
Dr.
macro.
Khaqan, even if, I mean, you're talking about the IMF, and of course, I mean, in detail we can talk another time, but overall there is a general fear in, in the public as far as the IMF and its program is concerned, as far as its conditionalities are concerned, and the fact that perhaps there will be price hikages linked to those conditionalities. Do you think an invariable increase or increases are going to be the order of the day when we do finalize? Do you think we're going to be looking at a lot of overall increase, which is what is being feared? Is it wrong to, I mean, those insinuations are incorrect in your expertise, in your opinion?
So Mahrukh, I mean, we'll have a detailed discussion so that I don't say things which make, the public uncomfortable, because I do analyze the IMF and the engagement very deeply, and even now there are price changes in the offing on the gas as well as in the electricity sector with the regulators. Whenever these are going to come through, which I think is sometime early July, the fund would push through the implementation. So yes, I think the bout of inflation, though I've said has tapered, is not going to come down very quickly, because these changes are in the offing, unfortunately.
Is it going to target, in your opinion, is it going to target, I mean, I also don't want to overly alarm the audience, but overall, do you think it's also going to target somebody who's concerned about whether the roti is 16 or 20 rupees or no? That segment of society or no?
I think, Mahrukh, to be honest, with the kind of inflation bouts that we have seen in the country, and the hikes, and even some hikes on the lower income earners, have been tough, and the country is doing tough on that, and that's a fact, and that's a reality of life. I think the price changes are going to be almost across the board, maybe less on the vulnerable segments, but there are going to be price changes which the regulator is going to come through. But we wait to see those price changes and then make a call. But they are in the offing and engagement with the fund. The fund's engagement is not going to be that easy. All I'm going to say, and then when we talk in detail, we've just come out of a 9-month standby arrangement. So think about it, that you had an interim government, and an interim government could have done a few things and then left the rest, or to the incoming government, which is for 5 years, to do the harder jobs. It's the same thing with the program. You have had a standby arrangement. It's helped you sail through even with price changes. But when the 5-year government engaging on a 3-year facility goes with the fund, I don't think it's going to be that easy as it has been in the SBA. It's going to be tough, and across the board on taxation and other measures. It's a long road ahead of reform, price changes, adjustments, making those targets. So it's a long road ahead of us. But the good part is it would give macro stability. It would set the stage for investment in the country. If we, keep doing all the other things and keep getting some employment into the country, picking up our exports at the end of the third year, if the economy looks a little better in those respects, we would have probably achieved something more substantive by the end of the 3 years. If we were to complete an engagement with the fund, we have only once in our lifetime of 24 programs ever completed a 3-year facility. So
but
that's food for thought.
I know that you're running out of time, but as far as one last question, as far as an extended facility is concerned, is this one, in your opinion, going to be 3-year one? Because we were early on, perhaps expecting a longer duration one, or no? It's going to be a 3-year.
I would suggest a 3-year, and we can do longer, but I would stick with the 3 years so that the government does whatever it needs to be done, and then has a bit of more time to enjoy, as I said, the fruits of growth that start coming in at that time, and some employment, and then have the rudder in their control rather than having it in the control of the IMF in the last 2 years of the governance.
Thank you so much, Dr. Khaqan. Thank you for your very valuable input as always. Thank you for joining us. We'll be taking a short break, after which we'll come back to talk about what's happening as far as Israel and Iran is concerned. What can we expect from there as far as in the region is concerned, as far as Pakistan is concerned, as far as overall, what kind of an effect overall as far as in the Middle East is concerned. All of that today after a short break. welcome back. We have with us Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, who's a political scientist. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Ishtiaq, we're talking about the claimed attack as far as Iran and Israel is concerned. What are your overall, what is your estimation as far as its effects, ripple effects, or whatever, as far as the region is concerned, particularly as far as the Middle East is concerned? How are you looking at it?
Well, as you know that the entire conflict erupted this time over the Hamas attack on Israel in October 2023. And since then, Israel has started a very brutal campaign in which more than 30,000 Palestinians, in which almost half of them are children, have been killed. So it's a great humanitarian tragedy evolving right before our eyes. And obviously, there was always a danger that this conflict will, shift beyond Gaza Strip and beyond this war between Hamas and Israel. And we see in the last couple of weeks, first the Israeli attack on the Iranian consulate in Damascus, then the Iranian retaliation last week. And now last night, there was apparently an Israeli attack in Iran, which obviously the Iranians are denying, and which is why they are not condemning. But this entire, conflagration of conflict, which is Middle Eastern in essence, is actually spreading to the rest of the region. And obviously Pakistan, although it is located in West South Asia, but it borders Iran, and anything that involves Iran and Israel will impact Pakistan as well.
But when we talk about the impact as far as Pakistan is concerned, as far as our own geostrategic position is concerned, like you said, of course, it's going to have effects. But in terms of this being contained, as far as the reports are now concerned, as far as the role of US is concerned also, doesn't it look like that, it's largely been contained? Do you agree with that? What's your estimation of that?
I think I agree with your point because there is visibly, the United States does not want this conflict to extend beyond certain limits because then US itself will embroil in the Middle Eastern conflict. So which is why it is calling repeatedly for restraint on the part of Israel and urging Israeli leadership to limit its offensive or retaliation in response to Iran's attack. And likewise, I noticed clearly there is a visible restraint on the part of the Iranian leadership also. So even if, this was an actual fact last night, but the Iranians have apparently informed, and sources are telling, different news channels, that they, even if, there was an Israeli onslaught or any attack from outside, so Iran has decided not to respond. So I think this exercise of restraint, which everybody is calling upon Israel and Iran, Saudis and Pakistanis also have expressed their joint concern over the evolving situation and their expectation that it will remain restrained. Because once it conflagrates and involves other countries of the Middle East, then obviously we are looking for a very geopolitically unprecedented situation, which is neither in the interest of Pakistan, Iran, or any other country in the Middle East or
as far as Israel itself is concerned, do you think that, they, as far as Netanyahu is concerned also, there is a kind of realization perhaps that they need to de-escalate now, but they're in too deep? Is that, some analysts have also said this. Would you agree with this point of view?
The problem is that the kind of leadership and the coalition government that exists right now in Israel, they have this interest in aggravating the conflict, which is why we have seen that there have been repeated calls for restraint by the US leadership, by other world leaderships. And you can see the visible difference, initially the Germans, the European Union, the United States, almost the entire Western world was absolutely supportive of Israel. But how the situation is evolved in the last 6 months or so, obviously, serious questions have been raised. And I think the problem lies in Tel Aviv.
As far as Israel itself is concerned, their own, they've been acting like a bully as far as the Middle East itself is concerned. They have completely, they're not seeing sense as far as their own actions are concerned. Isn't it too, as far as the outcry, as far as the public pressure is concerned, we've seen, for example, if you look at the rallies in New York, in London, in Paris, overall there is this outcry that has been building up. The images on social media, the atrocities overall are just hair-raising. The children, the women, the suffering is unparalleled. There's no other way of looking at what's happening. Do you think that?
I agree with you. I agree with you. You see, international public opinion is also a very powerful factor in an age of digital information that we live in today. But again, go back to 2003 when the Iraq war took place. There were so many rallies. Millions of people came out in London, in Italy, and elsewhere. But then obviously we have seen what happened in Iraq.
And the climate, Dr. Saab, I agree with you. I mean, maybe, that's a fair point, but isn't the overall climate of the world, the accessibility to social media, the accessibility to information also, that's also extended quite a bit. So perhaps the world today is different from the world of 2003, no?
Well, the thing is that what is actually happening that matters, in my opinion. What is actually happening is that in the last 24 hours, 40 more Palestinian lives have been lost. That is the actual reality. Whatever outcry we have seen across the Western world, in particular, also by the Jewish population, is important. But what is more important is that this issue should resolve. And what is needed now are two things. One, the humanitarian supplies should be, streamlined. Second, and far more important, is that ceasefire should take place, if you take back, the history, just before October 2023, there were, for many years, there was a clear pattern emerging that there was a wider reconciliation process taking place. Iran, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, GCC, Turkey, Egypt, and normalization of relations between Bahrain, UAE, Morocco, and the State of Israel. And obviously, the talk was that the Saudis were also thinking of normalizing relations.
As far as overall the situation at this time is concerned, let's hope, like you said, that there is de-escalation. Let's hope there is also peace. And let's hope that, like you said, the suffrage of the people of Palestine ends as we speak. Thank you so much, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed. Thank you so much for your very valuable input. Thank you for your time. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have today. As far as the overall situation is concerned, of course, there are no two ways of looking at what's happening as far as Israel and Palestine are concerned. Even as we speak, women and children continue to lose their lives. The barbarity, again, is unparalleled. The atrocities, as we speak, continue. The death toll continues and, to mount. And let's hope that we can move towards a swift solution for those people, for those children, for those women, for those babies. The images are clearly horrific and hair-raising. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.